People really need to look at posts like this post, libido, energy, better on low frequency TRT injections. Hello guys, I've seen that microdosing your long esters is way better and way healthier. So I went from 2 times a week to everyday injections, but my libido felt meh or even worse. I mean, who wants a meh libido? No male wants a meh libido. This one, more frequent injections make me feel worse. Over the last couple months, I switched from pinning every 12 days. And he goes, I know, because, you know, the Redditors and all this gospel repeating echo chamber nonsense is going to go, well, that's a prehistoric TRT protocol to be injecting so infrequently, to every week, to every 3 days. So now he's at every 3 days from every 12 days. Follow the protocol for the last 6 to 8 weeks, which is adequate enough time to see if the protocol is good for libido. Since then, my libido has strongly decreased. Then you got posts like this, which are similar. Higher sex drive when I miss a dose. Okay, guy misses a dose of testosterone and then sex drive comes back. Why is this? Does anyone feel better on less frequent injections? I mean, the testosterone subreddits, the help forums, are loaded with these scenarios where people are going once a week, maybe twice a week, then they switch to every other day or every day, and libido and erections take a hit. Libido dropped significantly after just going 2 times per week. This is a guy that was doing 1 200 milligram injection of Sustanon per week. He went to twice a week and libido went away. I'm going to finally break down for people why less frequent injections are the resolution for libido problems on TRT for the class of individuals that lose libido on TRT when they're doing very frequent injections, and how, though this has to do with estradiol, it more likely has to do with changes in the regulation and the turnover of androgen receptors from continuously loading your body with testosterone without giving it a break. Meantime, boys, look, Cortex Labs is a performance optimization and hormone consulting company for men. We got a range of different products ranging from Sourceless, the most popular product we've ever launched, a compilation of trusted sources for anabolics, ancillaries, and hormone acting agents, including DHT, including Testosterone esters, including anabolic steroids. Torque Stack is a nootropic that I built, which is Adderall without the side effects, basically 35% off right now. You can get that down in the description of this video. Lastly, I'm a coach on TRT protocol restructuring. I've got a one-off consult and longer one-on-one packages. You can hire me for that stuff in under a minute at livecortex.com. So as a coach on TRT, I get to see a lot of stuff that that most other people don't get to see, just simply because they're not coaches on TRT. Like, how could they see it? People have their N=1, which is their experience, but outside of their experience, they have not a whole lot other than what they've read on the web, and perhaps a lot of that, because it's an echo chamber, just gets repeated. People accept certain notions like everyday injections and they just kind of repeat them, and then people follow that advice. I usually get tasked with fixing libido and erection problems on androgens, whether it's cycles or TRT, usually just TRT. And in a good degree of these cases, not all of the cases, but a good degree of the cases, people are injecting every day cypionate or enanthate, or they're injecting every other day cypionate or enanthate. I rarely, in fact, I can't even remember the last time a guy came to me with libido issues when they were injecting cypionate or enanthate once a week. All those guys have rockin' libido and erections. All their protocols are dialed in. To explain why this happens, why when people start injecting less frequently, like once a week or even twice a week, in some cases once every 12 days, you know, with somewhat high boluses at once, and then they get their libidos back while, you know, they're dosing every day or every other day, these long acting esters, and libido basically mutes and erectile quality mutes and goes away. We have to take a look at exactly what happens when testosterone binds to the AR. In this case, this is the cytoplasm of the cell, this big white space here. Testosterone gets converted to 5-alpha dihydrotestosterone via 5-alpha reductase in the cytoplasm. You have DHT, or the androgen in general, binding to the LBD. This is one of the binding domains. There's 3 binding domains. These are just facilitators of the gene expression once an androgen receptor is bound to by either testosterone or DHT. And then from there, there's this process, if you see this arrow here, called translocation. The AR itself, the androgen receptor, this androgen receptor actually translocates or shifts into the nucleus of a given cell. For all the genetic activity that happens thereafter, it's actually this is a simplified schematic of it all. The AR, which is now in the nucleus of the cell, binds to these things called androgen responsive elements that's effectively in your DNA, and then it drives expression of cell survival and proliferation genes and target genes. They're target genes that are androgen responsive, which are ultimately responsible for the effects you get at the tissue level, penile tissue, and optimizing endothelium and nitric oxide so that you can have erections in the brain, so that you can regulate libido and have sexual desire. So this is how it's supposed to work if, the ARs are functioning correctly and, you've got an adequate or an intelligent administration of testosterone. With continued administration of long esters of testosterone without a break, even though we think that androgen receptors upregulate in response to testosterone, which is partially true, you will end up making more androgen receptors. What people don't understand about androgen receptors is after this set of sequences happens in the nucleus of a given cell via the AR translocating into it, modified by an androgen like testosterone or DHT, is that you don't just keep the same amount of androgen receptors, and once this process happens, like that androgen receptor just like goes back into circulation and can be used again. It actually gets degraded. And these things called proteasomes, which are basically a combination of proteases, these proteins that degrade receptors, in this case, degrade the receptor. Now, if you have oversaturation of testosterone by, as an example, injecting a long ester consistently, like every day or every other day, you both have continued degradation of androgen receptors, as well as what's ultimately going to be a temporary reduction, maybe a somewhat permanent reduction in the sex hormone binding globulin. And if the sex hormone binding globulin gets too low in blood concentrations, well, then this genetic set of sequences that happens after the AR translocates into the nucleus of a cell gets inhibited. You basically have a halting of this process for unknown period of time. So with continued injections of long esters done too consistently without a break, the SHBG really can't recover to its original state to be transporting androgens into target tissues and to facilitate the genetic expression of testosterone once bound to the AR. And then you have androgens binding to the AR still, but not doing what they're supposed to do and affecting androgen responsive genes. And then you not getting a response at the tissue level. In the penis, this means you don't get the endothelial blood flow optimization, and you don't get the nitric oxide that testosterone is supposed to induce. The nitric oxide signaling activation only happens after the set of genetic sequences that take place after, DHT or testosterone binds to the androgen receptor. Now, back to the question of like, why are people in these cases feeling better when they just do one injection per week of testosterone? You got people in the comment section go, well, this probably has to do with the level of estrogen you feel best at. You probably don't make quite enough conversion with frequent dosing. I think that's not true. Estrogen will influence this dynamic. If you have one bolus injection per week, or say 2 bolus injections per week, yes, the estrogen is going to peak. It's also going to trough. But what's important about the peak is that estradiol will then tell the liver to make more sex hormone binding globulin, which is going to allow for the genetic actions as well as the transport of androgens to be more optimal. This one, feeling better with infrequent injection, where the actual post was deleted, but I think the first comment kind of highlights exactly what we're trying to say. I do 1 shot a week. I try twice a week, 3 times a week, every other day and every day. And my libido got worse the more frequently I injected. I wouldn't mind every other day insulin syringe injections. They're easy, but they just don't work for me. 1 shot every week at 125 milligrams, and I have no side effects and everything seems to be normal. These guys are not overloading the AR with continuous injections. Okay, they're not overloading estradiol with continuously building more estradiol at the tissue level from the previous injection. You're just layering tissue level estradiol as you continue to inject every single fucking day, regardless of what the serum says. The serum doesn't tell you a whole lot about what's happening at the tissues, and I think overloads of estradiol at the tissue are problematic if you have no trough. On infrequent injections, injections, you have a pretty big trough. If you've ever run your blood work at doing nadir dosing, which is where you inject once every 5 days or once every 7 days, and you run your blood work at day 2 or 3, you're going to see a total peak in testosterone that's pretty high. You're going to see a peak in estradiol that's relatively high. Then if you go run labs at day 4.5, day 5, especially day 6 and 7, you're going to see troughs in all of these numbers. This is where the body's getting a break from androgens, from the androgen load. It's clearing from the system. You're not constantly binding to ARs and thus degrading a good degree of ARs without perhaps sufficient time to build more ARs. Estrogen has a chance to go down, and then when you're ready for your injection next, the SHBG has recovered, estradiol's in a pretty lowered state, ARs are primed and ready for more testosterone and dihydrotestosterone. Then you inject, you're already in this lower estrogen state, then you get a surge of androgens and everything fucking works well. They actually then register well on the androgen receptor side. What I think ultimately happens is you have more androgen responsive elements within the DNA that can actually register at the tissue level your androgenic like effect. So this whole process here then can work normally. But this process, what I'm arguing is that this process gets skewed with continued injections of testosterone in these cases with people without a break. That's one of the reasons for me personally, and multiple dozens of people that I've worked with, that like 70 to 100 milligrams every 3rd or 4th day, you'd be better off doing it every 4th day, are as like a perfect range and ends up being a perfect protocol, because the SHBG can come back up, estrogen peaks, then it troughs back down. You're not constantly saturating the ARs with androgens, and therefore you keep that process of translocation and genetic expression of androgen receptors pretty streamlined, pretty functional, and not impaired. So my advice to people that are having problems on long-acting esters that are injecting very frequently and you don't have libido is to take 4 or 5 days off of testosterone, stop injecting for the next 4 days, and then on that 5th day, call it, inject what you would inject in a week. Say you're at 150 milligrams, just inject that entire 150 milligrams at once, and then don't inject for another 6 or 7 days thereafter. If there are side effects that come along with that, like hematocrit, well, you need to get your lifestyle straight. You've got to drink less because that contributes to elevated hematocrit. If you smoke, well, that's borderline dangerous on TRT because that's going to raise your hematocrit as well, in addition to TRT doing it. You got to start doing cardio. You should probably start taking compounds like Nootropics to lower your hematocrit, and you got to do all the other lifestyle things to lower hematocrit. If you have overstimulation or sleep problems, those kinds of issues tend to just go away on their own after likely the neurotransmitter receptor sites kind of regulate in response to what is ultimately excessive catecholamines, dopamine or adrenaline. That's just one of the things that happens with TRT, but it always regulates. So you just stick through that and then continue down that path moving forward. You're going to find probably on week 2, maybe even on the first bolus injection, that your libido starts coming back. And as you continue doing this, system gets to regulate, the ARs get to regulate, the androgen responsive elements in the DNA get to regulate. Well, then you probably get your libido and erections back, and they're going to come back full force. I see this time and time again. This is why I'm so adamant about this. A lot of you have asked me to break it down in a layman's way, but also showing the background scientific reason that this happens, and I hope this video has been sufficient in that regard. It is not the case that frequent injections of long esters is like undeniably the best way to go for everybody. That's just not true. Okay, it is not true. It's not true. It is not true, guys. Yeah, it'll be effective for some people. It's going to stave off side effects for other people. It may be fine for the libido if they're injecting in minute doses, but for some individuals, based on this androgen receptor stuff and the gene expression stuff, yeah, they're going to stop responding to testosterone completely. The SHBG is going to tank too far down. Then the target genes are not going to be activated from your DHT and your testosterone. Now, people have to play with this. Maybe it's twice a week that, you inject 70 milligrams or 100 milligrams. I've got guys running 150 milligrams every 3rd day, and that's just enough time in between where everything works. Now, those guys usually need some kind of estrogen control to keep estrogen in range, and everything works really beautifully. Then I've got other guys that, if you don't want to do estrogen control, you got to just like bring the gap further. It's got to be every 5th day, something like 100 milligrams, 120 milligrams. Again, a golden protocol for me personally, which again, my N equals 1 doesn't mean a whole lot, but it should at least weigh into this, is 70 milligrams of cypionate every 4th day. That's perfect. I don't have to manage estrogen at all. My dick is hard as a rock. My libido's fucking roaring the whole time. So if you're having issues on everyday injections and your libido isn't good, or it's, God forbid, it's terrible, remember, these people exist, okay? Libido energy better on low frequency. Look at this guy. More frequent injections make me feel worse. Should we keep going? High sex drive when I miss a dose. Does anyone feel better on less frequent injections? Anyone prefer less frequent dosing? Feeling better with frequent injection? Who feels better off 1 shot a week? List goes on. I hope I've sufficiently made this point. All right, boys, as I said, I'm a coach on TRT, protocol restructuring. I mean, that's the primary thing that we do. We'll fix your protocol, whether it's splitting up the injections, adding the right dose of the right AI or DHT derivative, having access to things like DHT to really resolve longstanding issues. You can hire me for a one-off consult, or if you need longstanding help with serious sexual dysfunction, this stuff takes time. If you have the budget, you need to hire me for at least 3 months. I won't do 1 month anymore for people that have serious sexual dysfunction, at least 3 or 6 months. These are big programs where you're working directly with me ongoingly, and you can book any of those in under a minute at livecortex.com, and we'll be on the fact-finding call as soon as tomorrow. If you need to circumvent your clinic because they can't give you what you want, or you want to try DHT gel, you want to try Proviron, you want to run some Prima, want to run some Mastron to control estrogen, and that's going to dial you in, just get Source List. Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, sometimes you're going to need to do these kinds of things. If you need testosterone, any ester you want at your doorstep in 3 or 4 days, you don't want to have to go through the rigmarole of the clinic because they may not be able to prescribe it or get it or whatever. You want to try things, experiment, just get Source List. You'll make your money back literally on your first purchase of stuff from the sources. Torque stack, our nootropic stack, Adderall without the side effects. Basically, get it down in the description of this video. It is 35% off right now. All right, boys, listen, I tried to do a podcast with Ryan Root from Hormones for Me on a big, long breakdown of the sex hormone binding globulin yesterday, but Ryan's internet service was kind of in and out and cutting out, and the final product of the content came out very, very choppy and very, very blurry. So we're going to do it again sometime soon, so look forward to that. It's a big breakdown of SHBG that I think everyone's going to want to hear. Otherwise, please sub to the channel if you're new here. We do breakdowns like this all the time. I hope you guys had a great weekend. Hope you have a great week moving forward. Much more content coming soon. And I'll talk to you boys on the next one.